Lost media is a term for media that isn't accessible to the public anymore. Usually, media isn't lost, so much as it's just forgotten or misplaced, and finding it is just a matter of opening the right box or finding a random link. Other times, it's completely missing, either becoming lost in an accident or destroyed by negligence. And sometimes, media can be preserved, but hoarders and collectors refuse to share it with the public because they would rather preserve its value as a rare collectible. Lost media can be accidental, intentional, genuinely lost, or just hidden out of greed. But what happens when media isn't lost in the traditional sense? What happens when lost media doesn't want to be found? Misspelling, an analog horror, was uploaded to YouTube in mid to late 2025 and follows the story of a man finding a lost series from the late 1960s. A show so obscure, so lost, that its existence was discovered by pure accident and later hidden out of greed from everyone else for years, left as nothing more than rumors rotting at the bottom of forum posts. The actual story of Misspelling's history is actually really interesting, and I'd highly recommend looking it up if you have the time. The story of the analog horror, however, is controversial, to say the least. But before we talk about that, allow me to say welcome back. Or if this is your first time with us, then hello. I'm your favorite food critic creature, Chef D-Bone, and as you've already guessed, tonight we'll be reviewing Misspelling, an analog horror. I know not everyone has a taste for analog horror, especially analog IP horror, but after seeing so many requests in the last video, I decided to give this reanimated horror a review. And normally, this is the part of the video where I would recommend going to the original creator's channel and watching the series there before proceeding with this review. But we're in a unique situation where lost media horror almost became lost media. Thankfully, I was already in the middle of writing this script and editing all of the videos together when the series was deleted, so I was able to upload them in a compilation that you can find in the pinned comment down below. And if you enjoy it, then please consider liking my re-upload of the series. But if you've already watched the compilation and you're just here to listen to my thoughts on the series, then that's great. In any case, it's time. Madmen and mad madames, I invite you to relax, pull up a chair, as this cooking thrall proudly presents Misspelling. The first upload of the series, Demon Reel, appears to be mostly unedited clips of animation reels from the late 1960s, featuring the original dubs of Prince Perfect and Misspelling, as well as the original test footage of the Martian Marshmallows commercials that were discovered 3 months before this upload. Each of them lists the season and episode number before they play, with Prince Perfect being listed as Season 2, Episode 7, the original Martian Marshmallows commercials being listed as Season 1, Episode 1, and Misspelling being listed as nothing. The season and episode number are completely censored, only leaving Misspelling's name.
Luckily for you both, I have a map. Our adventure starts with A, and we sail our boat to B. But you better be careful, little lass, or you will drown it.
The footage cuts to a drawing of Misspelling tied to a chair at the bottom of the ocean. A group of random letters scrawled out next to her on the page. Or so it could appear. If you're familiar at all with analog horror or creepypasta in general, you could probably guess that this is a cipher sitting next to her. And, although it's not obvious at first, we do actually get the key to this cipher earlier in this episode. By going into the transcript of this episode, we're able to see a very similar message appear at the beginning animation. In the transcript, but not the closed captions. I'm not sure how they did this. I tried looking it up afterwards, but nothing came up when I searched for this. Weird. Well, in any case, we can assume that this message in the transcript translates to these closed captions, which still doesn't help us when trying to decipher this message. With only these letters available, we would have to brute force the rest of the message to understand what it says. Thankfully, we do get the full cipher in the episode Legacy of Media, and using that, we're able to translate this message to:
You will not forget me. I will rise like the coming tide and drag you down to the shallow grave so that the world forgets us both. XX.
Overall, it's a very interesting presentation for an analog horror, though not too noteworthy when compared to the rest of the series overall. I think the captions trick that the editor was able to pull off was very interesting, but also unnoticeable to the average viewer. And even if you did know about it, with only the word gullible to go off of, there wasn't enough to translate the full message without brute forcing it. And the episode as a whole is just a lot of reused animations from the late 1960s. The most interesting part of it was the rediscovered Martian Marshmallows commercials that were shown, but the editor doesn't do anything with it. This episode also isn't mentioned in the rest of the series, and with the editor mentioning how rare it is to find misspelling media with audio intact, it feels like this episode isn't actually part of the main series and is more of an analog appetizer for what we can expect moving forward. Overall, it's fine as an episode. I wish they had done more with the captions trick or had done more with the animations that they found, but as a setup to the rest of the series, it works for what it is. However, the next upload is where the editor took a potentially interesting premise and completely ruined it with one of the worst decisions I have ever seen in analog horror. If you're still interested, then be warned. This is where the series takes a very controversial turn. The first numbered episode of the series, titled The Vault, begins with the editor telling us that their brother recently won a storage unit at an auction. And after looking through the unit, the editor notices an old film reel for a show that he doesn't recognize. The editor begins the painstaking process of scanning the reel, hoping he could upload it to a Discord server for lost media. Once he does, the Discord server urges him to scan more of the film reel, telling him that more of the film reel could help with their search, or at the very least preserve what he already has. The editor mentions taking a brief break from scanning the film reel, and when he returns, the entire film reel is completely defaced. Misspelling's eyes are constantly crossed out, and every other character is completely erased. This is, unfortunately, from what I understand, and from everything I've seen, completely real. These are actual film reels that were destroyed for nothing more than an analog horror. After watching the entire series and going to the original creator's account, I was able to find out that they had a link to their eBay account where they were selling all of the props used in this analog horror. I was able to find a lot of props that the original creator didn't use in their series, including this misspelling record, some other misspelling puppets, and the rest of the film reel, which, as you can clearly tell, is destroyed. If this was all that the original uploader did, I would still have so many problems with them, but what they did next is genuinely disgusting. There's no joke, there's no funny PNG, just this.
I'm Arthur, creator of Misspelling. TUV had a deal worked out. Signed a contract with him right away. And then I took it. Ended up stealing this magic book with a jumbled letter and unique character shapes. Brought them home. My daughter, Misspelling, would come to life and enter the real life. Nah, I lost everything when I signed away any rights I had to the kids.
They didn't give me a choice.
Regret it. If I had a second chance, I would have never talked to her. Put my faith in her. I trusted her with everything. I wanted to just drown her in that stupid the children. I couldn't have the other kids. I ended up making
games collect our children.
I didn't mention this when I was reviewing the first upload, but the name Arthur Milbury briefly appears on screen before the animations play, introducing us to a character. Except, we aren't introduced to a character. We're given the name of a real person, the actual creator of Misspelling. For those of you who don't know, the original cross-eyes creepypasta is based off of an actual TV show that was considered fully lost or non-existent media for most of 2012 to 2016. It was only in late 2016 that it was finally proven to exist after years of lies and speculation from people trying to claim her as their creation. I'd like to go over this topic in a lot more detail, but better people than me have already made their own videos explaining the controversy, and I would highly recommend going to watch them for yourself. In the meantime, I'm only discussing the analog horror and all of the controversies that surround this. Turning back to this upload, it seems like the editor wants this series to take place before Misspelling was properly rediscovered, and is using audio of Arthur Milbury to imply that he got rid of his wife and daughter in an attempt to bring Misspelling to life. To save you one long tangent on all the reasons why this is absolutely disgusting and abhorrent, I'm going to acknowledge it as a horrible thing and try to approach the series with a neutral lens, which becomes much more difficult because immediately following this tape, we get this. A fake missing poster of his daughter and his wife's obituary. And after that, the episode ends with the editor noting that they have name now. They have name now, Misspelling, and can use that to find out more about the missing series. Episode 2, Legacy of Media, opens with the editor returning to the storage unit in search of more Misspelling memorabilia. Inside the storage unit, they find Misspelling puppets, backgrounds, and a little bit more of her past. After closely examining all of the props and puppets, he finds out that almost every background has a strange encoded message written on the back. Although he brushes it off as nothing more than random gibberish, you and I know better. Thankfully, in this episode, we're finally able to find the full cipher by jumping to the timestamp at 2. Oh. Huh. Once again, the editor surprises me, although in a much more pleasant way this time. I'm not sure if it's on purpose or a happy accident, but I'll be generous and give them credit for this trick. It seems whatever the editor did distorted the preview image you would get by scrubbing the timeline, replacing the usual preview images with this. And since I can't find where the cipher is, I may as well leave it up to you to decode some of these messages on your own. But to save you some time, the notes are basically a back and forth between Arthur and whoever Misspelling could be. One of the first notes that we can see doesn't need translation.
I hear her constantly. I feel her staring through my own eyes. Daddy loves you, little witch. He just needs some time for private thoughts.
At first, it seems obvious that Misspelling is Cecilia, Arthur's daughter, but going through the rest of the notes, we begin to see a story unfold. Arthur begins to question if he really did summon his daughter, or something else. He starts recording all of his thoughts in cryptic ciphers to hide them from whoever it is. Unfortunately for him, it seems that Misspelling eventually does decipher the code, and she begins mocking him through the messages.
Children are a legacy. Children are a gift. You threw both of those away in the lake. Now you don't get to be remembered. Neither of us will.
The editor, completely unaware of what he stumbled upon, dismisses all of the notes, and moves on to catching us up with what's happened in their life. In the first episode, they joined a Discord server for lost media to help them identify the series. However, it seems that they've been kicked off of the server, and any mention of Misspelling's name has been completely banned. Thankfully, he was able to get into contact with another user who was kicked off of the server. The user named... I don't know how to pronounce that, or if there even is a way to pronounce it. So, moving forward, I'll call the other user K. K and the editor decide to look into the Misspelling mystery. But it seems like K is already a few steps ahead of the editor and already found an episode. Unfortunately, Kay is oddly vague and elusive about how they found the episode, and the editor chalks up their responses to be a mix of mistranslations and miscommunication. Afterwards, the editor takes the investigation in a new direction and starts to look up Misspelling's name on Wikipedia. After finding nothing there, the editor goes to Arthur Milberry's Wikipedia instead, and finds a dead link for a Misspelling wiki there. Disheartened but not deterred, the editor tries one more thing, and looks up the studio's wiki through Arthur Milberry's page. Although it initially seems like another dead end, with Misspelling not appearing under the productions list, he eventually finds something unexpected under the cultural impact section, a link for an odd story. Following the final link, the editor finds a summary page for the original 2012 Cross-Eyes creepypasta, back when the community given name for her was still Spella. Could this be a clue to when the story takes place? Possible, but just like with every other thread the editor has pulled so far, this one leads to the same thing, a dead end and a dead link. Going back for a few frames, we can briefly see the red creature that the original creepypasta alludes to, as it appears for just a second before taking the red X out of Misspelling's hand, and then her face, and then the entire page. We then cut to a photograph of a metal box in the editor's house, something he took with him from the storage unit. He slowly draws closer to the box, wondering what he's inadvertently invited into his home. Because if that was just a story, then what was he looking at? The video then ends abruptly, and we're left with fewer answers than we had before. Taking a moment to step back, I want to address what this episode does right, and what I believe it still does wrong. First, if the effect when you scrub the video was intentional, then it was very interesting. But, just like with the captions trick, it was easily missable. And, unlike the captions trick, it doesn't add anything to the episode overall. At most, it's a very interesting visual, but does nothing to advance the story or help the viewer. Second, I'm still very disappointed that the editor has decided to double down on the dead daughter aspect of this story, and his decision to depict Arthur Milberry as this cartoon cult member. However, it seems like after this episode, Arthur and Cecilia are never mentioned by the editor again, and although their absence may go unnoticed, their presence at the beginning of this story still lingers on and remains with the viewer, haunting the narrative like a ghost. I'm not sure if the editor had plans to retcon Misspelling and completely remove Arthur and Cecilia from the story, but it would make sense given their absence from the rest of the episodes and the backlash they received in the comments sections. Speaking of the comments sections, this is where the editor decides to take their search in the next upload, Lost Media. The third upload opens with the editor returning to the creepypasta wiki and finding out that it was deleted. Although he notes that it's very weird that it happened so suddenly after he went to the website, he doesn't seem too concerned, and begins looking for the creepypasta readings on YouTube instead. While looking through YouTube, he's able to find a lot of information about Cross-Eyes, but still nothing about Misspelling herself. But before he's able to share what he's found out with us, something odd happens once again. As the screen fades to black, several letters in the text are highlighted in red. The phrase, "Pretend I don't exist," briefly appears before the editor gives us their updates. As the video goes on, several other text boxes have their letters highlighted in red, pleading with the editor, or perhaps us, to stop this search. In any case, the editor still seems oblivious to these changes, and instead focuses on the comments sections of the creepypastas. Below the videos, he finds a lot of praise for the uploaders' fan readings and fan animations of Cross-Eyes. He notices that Misspelling's real name is never used in the comments. Hoping to find any clues about the original show, he eventually does stumble upon her real name, and someone else's. He finds Kay's name, fully uncensored, attached to a YouTube account. Following the comments to Kay's profile, he finds something that he wasn't expecting. He finds the episodes that Kay had sent, but now, Misspelling is completely missing. The editor shows the videos that Kay had sent to them privately and compares them to the uploads on their channel. And we see that Misspelling isn't just erased, but she's been completely written out of the show. The editor tries to find more information in the upload's description, but unfortunately, he's hit with another dead end. Deciding that the only way he can get answers is by asking Kay directly, he ends the video by promising that he'll email them. And then the episode fades to black, with the words, "Stop now," lingering behind. And I want to stop here so I can briefly go over my thoughts about this episode and a few moments from the series so far. Looking back on this episode, it doesn't seem like any new YouTube tricks are used like they were in the pilot and the second episode. However, I'm not sure if that's because the uploader decided to stop including them, or they simply went unnoticed before the episodes were deleted. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever find out unless the editor decides to return to the internet at some point in the future. Looking at the tricks I did notice in this episode, I enjoyed them repurposing the A and B segments of Misspelling to give us a visual representation of her being erased from the show. But, unfortunately, that's also where my praise for this episode ends. And it'll be the last nice thing I say about an episode for a while. Because the next upload, Mundane Catalog, is unfortunately a turn in the wrong direction for this series. The next upload, titled Mundane Catalog, is a departure from the rest of the series' format and is presented as a parody of emergency broadcast videos. Instead of following the editor's usual exploits, we're introduced to a new character in the series, Mundane, who presents the misspelling horror in a new light, focusing more on the world's reaction to misspelling instead of the editor's. Unfortunately, Mundane Catalog is almost completely lost. The copy I downloaded got severely corrupted halfway through, and I wasn't able to download another version of the video before the channel and all of the other videos got deleted. So, you'll have to settle with my live stream reaction to the video instead. This also means that it'll be missing from the full compilation as well, unless the original video can be discovered elsewhere. Which I honestly think is for the best, because this episode overall throws off the tone and pacing of the entire series. It's unfortunate that the episode may be lost, but I don't really think anything of value was lost. Skipping past most of Mundane's video, we eventually hear him talk about the Hyde Media Challenge, and I'll leave the explanation up to him.
However, the most recent challenge online is much more dangerous than the Grimace Shake. The Hyde Media Challenge takes advantage of the roleplay element to create a story about people going mad after watching a lost series of episodes from TUV Studios. Users would post videos of themselves desperately deleting their internet history after watching the episodes, usually after a friend or family member walks into the room. Other videos followed people trying to destroy fan art of her with water by flushing it down the toilet, or typing out Misspelling's name and using autocorrect to change it to Misspelling on their phone. While harmless and slightly humorous, this trend was quickly hijacked by a group of devoted role players who took it to an extreme. Role players for this challenge claimed to have seen the entire show, and said that every trace of misspelling needed to be burned and erased. Some members of this community go to extreme lengths to remain in character, including online harassment, such as false copyright strikes, anonymous threats, and more. One person following this trend went to a Halloween store and destroyed a display full of knockoff misspelling costumes. Another attempted to set fire to a mall stand that was selling dolls of the character. As the years go by, it appears that these internet trends steadily become more and more dangerous. Please monitor the content your children consume. Thank you for listening to our service announcement, and please be safe in our mundane world.
So, to go over what this video sets up, it establishes some rules for Misspelling and her connection to the Hyde Media Challenge, implying that Misspelling was responsible for the creation of the challenge to help her erase any existing media of misspelling, matching reality and lending some credence to the idea that Misspelling is only a creepypasta character in this universe and not some broadcast boogeyman. Second, it establishes that only people who have seen the entire series are affected by this phenomenon, implying that it's their obsession with the series that leads to their possession. Overall, I feel like this is a very fine episode, There are a few issues I noticed that affected the continuity, but I can see the creator tried to do something new and interesting, and I can't blame them for that. I think one of the biggest issues this episode has overall is its effect on the continuity. While I enjoy that we have another character that finally calls Misspelling by her proper name, you begin to realize how many problems it introduces to the narrative. The editor clearly wants this story to take place in a world where Misspelling's name was never properly discovered. So it could either be set in 2016 or it could be set in the present. But if it's set in the present in a world where her name was never discovered, how would Mundane use her name? Alternatively, if we believe that the story takes place in 2016, then why is her name so difficult to find now? Hey, just a late editor's note. After watching the episode again, it clearly does take place in 2025 because Mundane literally mentions the Grimace Shake Challenge and Hide Media, so I can't believe I missed that. Anyway, moving on. Sorry. So either the entire series takes place in 2012 to 2016 and this episode is the only exception to that, or the entire series takes place in 2025 and Mundane is the only one who knows Misspelling's real name. In any case, it's a fine episode. I feel like it does a lot wrong, and it's one of the weakest episodes by far, but these last few episodes aren't nearly as bad as the rest. There's only 3 episodes left, so I hope you still have your analog appetite. Episode 4, Always Watching, opens with a similar message as Episode 3, with the narrator apologizing for their late upload schedule, but this time noting that they were feeling unwell. The editor shares an email that they sent to Kay, but they don't censor her name properly, and for a brief frame we get to see her name fully uncensored. Caitlin. However, we don't have time to linger on this revelation, because while he shows the email she sent in response, we see that the typical text that we've been reading throughout the series starts to trail off the screen. And not long after, Caitlin's email becomes distorted, a vague silhouette of misspelling appearing before the word forget replaces the email's body. Caitlin follows this email up with another.
I can feel her voice fading. She's trying to use you next. Once she's inside, lock the windows and doors behind her. She's a precious memory, one I'm willing to share with you.
But before our editor has an opportunity to watch it, he slowly starts to question his own obsession with the series.
I don't know why I'm still looking for her, still watching her, still seeing her everywhere, when she's been here this whole time, when she's been watching me, when she's been staring back at me, staring back at us. And it was all useless. It was all pointless. What was the point? What was your plan? You could have stopped. You should have stopped. But you didn't. You did this. There's only one way to end this. One way you can be free. A way I can be forgotten.
The last 2 parts of the message are broken up between Caitlin's email and the editor's text, with Caitlin sending him a new video. The second to last upload, Hijack, opens with an epilepsy warning. But instead of warning the viewer to avoid a certain timestamp, we're told that typing may cause flashing images to appear, and that participants will be safe if they follow along verbally. We're not given much time to question this, as the message quickly disappears. Misspelling appears for the first time in a physical form, inviting us to a lesson on typing. She sets out the rules, telling us to type the letters as they turn red, and avoid all of the underlines. Whether you participate or don't, the end result remains the same. The last video doesn't have a title, and instead of being met with the editor's usual text, we see through the editor's perspective as he places the misspelling puppet in a crucible. Whether this is a stand-in for the original misspelling puppet or a tribute to her is unclear. In the background, we can hear a slowed-down version of an old song called When the Gramophone Shop Caught Fire. The camera closes in on the puppet as it burns, and we're left with one last lingering shot on the puppet before the video fades to black. And we're greeted once again by our reflection. And with that, I want to reflect on what the series has done so far and see what it all means in the story. Near the beginning of the series, the editor finds a tape recording of Arthur Milbury. The audio we hear implies that Arthur was in the middle of a divorce and lost custody of his children to his wife, Evelyn. Sometime before or after this, the Arthur in the story finds a book that gives him the idea to bring his creations to life. But to do so, he would need a sacrifice, and the only way to have access to his child was to get rid of Evelyn first. After completing the ritual, Arthur begins to have doubts about whether he brought back his daughter or something else. And Misspelling, whoever she is at this moment, lashes out at Arthur, begging him to erase the show. Although the editor doesn't point it out, we are able to see that the Wikipedia mentions the actual fire at TUV Studios, which was used as inspiration for the cross-eyes creepypasta, implying some connection between Misspelling and the fire at the studio. Jumping forward ahead in time, the editor eventually finds Misspelling puppets and props inside a storage unit that his brother bought. After taking a break from scanning the reel, he comes back to find out that most of the film reel was destroyed, and several of the other props in the storage unit were defaced. And we're led to believe that everything, from the fire to the destroyed props, the scratched film reel, and the deleted creepypasta, was because Misspelling wanted to erase every trace of herself. And I can only think of one reason for this motive. Throughout the series, it is constantly spelled out for us that Misspelling is Cecilia. And although I wanted to believe that that was wrong and the editor was preparing a twist for the future, I believe that the editor's original intention was for Misspelling to be Cecilia. Whatever Arthur did in the story worked, and Cecilia became trapped in Arthur's mind, becoming the perfect representation of Misspelling, an ideal idea. But before I dive any deeper into this, I do feel the need to point out that none of this is real. The real-life Cecilia is alive and well, and I would beg you to please not contact her about this analog horror or the creepypasta or the original show in general. We are only talking about a fictional version of Arthur and Cecilia that does not reflect reality at all, and they have no involvement in this story outside of their likeness being used. Are we all good with that? Good. Stepping back to the analog horror, Arthur begins to have doubts about whether he successfully summoned his daughter or a demon, and tries to keep her out of his mind. And in retaliation, she decides to erase Misspelling from the world. And now that the editor has found the series, she was able to find him, an unwitting puppet who could help her in her endeavors to erase Misspelling. After attracting an audience to watch his uploads, Misspelling forces him to upload Hijack, allowing her to spread her influence even further, and gathering more people to help her destroy the series. And that's where the series ends, for now and possibly forever. The uploader made a now-deleted post where they said that they had a plan for a second season that would have followed the brother character and his children. But since they've deleted everything and left the internet, I think this is where the story ends. And now I have to wonder, would I recommend watching this series after reviewing all of their uploads? I don't think I can. Anything good I have to say about this analog horror starts and ends with the first upload. The first upload being a demo reel is interesting in concept, but in execution it's boring and hollow. And the rest of the uploads aren't better. We're forced to follow a character without any character, a person without any personality. These small snippets of Arthur speaking held more personality and more character than our editor ever displayed. There's no defining trait to their personality. All we know about them is that they have a brother and they're interested in finding misspelling media. They're not even curious or scared about what caused everything, the scratched film reel. Aside from mild curiosity, this film reel is completely forgotten about throughout the rest of the series. This was a good opportunity to slowly show the editor getting possessed by his obsession with the series, constantly thinking about what caused everything. It's not even analog horror at a certain point, it's digital lore dumping by the time we get to the creepypasta. There's absolutely nothing scary in any of these uploads either. Over 6 videos, we see a grand total of 8 paranormal incidents. We see some text turn red and we see some images disappear. That's it. The scariest thing this series does is write fan fiction about real life people. And it honestly makes me think that this series would be better off forgotten. Maybe it would have been better if Misspelling was forgotten too. The series is partially found now, and all of the episodes that are missing audio are slowly being redubbed by the fans, but aside from that, what's really been done with Misspelling? I mean, is this what Arthur would have wanted? Is this how we've decided to revive a character? By taking away every hint of their personality and turning them into a Halloween mask for any monster to wear? And I know that's not the lesson I should take away from this, and it's certainly not the one I want to leave with any of you, but it's hard to put a positive spin on this when I've been sitting here reviewing a series that was dedicated to dragging a man's name through the mud, depicting him as this monster that would get rid of his own daughter in order to chase his ambitions. It feels like the series started off with a generally good idea and a fine foundation, but ended up sticking too closely to the creepypasta. Back in the early 2010s to 2012s, it was generally normal to take a creator from a TV show and work them into the narrative in some way. And it worked well for the original cross-size creepypasta because back then everyone thought that it was a piece of fictional media anyway. But that's not acceptable anymore with modern writing on the internet. We know better than to include real people in fan fictions about cartoon characters with bloody eyes. Or at least we should know better now. We've seen enough writers of the past make these mistakes time and time again that we should have learned from them by now. And maybe that's the lesson I can take away from all of this. You're going to make mistakes when you try to make a piece of art. And that's okay. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make a project and it doesn't pan out well. It's okay if it's not perfect. It's okay if you make a major mistake and you fix it. And that's the most important part, that you fix it. That you take this experience and you learn and grow. And I hope that applies to the original uploader as well. I feel like he did learn somewhere along the way that what he was doing was wrong. I think that's why we don't end up seeing more of Cecilia and Arthur's interactions as the series goes on. And I think that's also why we don't see any more destroyed props as we continue. maybe there was a plan to rewrite the narrative and retcon everything so that misspelling was something else, and what happened in the story didn't happen, or it did and we could just brush past it. But those are all maybes and what ifs, what may have and what could have been. But with the series ending where it did and the uploader not returning to the internet for the past 3 months, I don't know. In the end, I think we can all agree misspelling an analog horror was a mistake. But hopefully it was a mistake that we can all learn from and not repeat. Thank you all for watching. I've been your server, your reviewer, and your host, Chef D-Bone, and I hope that you enjoyed this analog review and that you'll come back really soon.